You're pardoning people who beat police officers with baseball bats. Like, how has the party of law and order made its peace with that?
Do you think Donald Trump understands the crypto coin that's got his name on it?
I do not know the answer to that.
Is it a conflict of interest, though? I mean, he is the president. Should this be allowed?
Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump, off.
I guess he's learning to speak Donald Trump's language, isn't he? Hello, I'm Tom Bradby, and I'm joined from Washington by Dan, as always, and alongside him is the long-term Republican strategist, Brett O'Donnell. Hello to you both. Very nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Great to see you, Tom.
I watched the new White House press secretary, as you must have done.
It's an honor to be here with all of you. A lot of familiar faces in the room, a lot of new faces. And President Trump is back, and the golden age of America has most definitely begun.
What have I done with my life? At 27, I could have had one of the most powerful jobs. Tell us about her and how on earth she got to be in this incredibly powerful position at such a young age.
We were just talking about that. So for those that don't know, you'd be forgiven for maybe not being aware of her. She's only just done her first press conference, just an hour from when we are speaking now. So she's 27 years old, the youngest ever White House press secretary, and we think, right, Brett, that Ron Ziegler, Nixon's press secretary, was the next youngest, who was a whole 29, which makes us all feel pretty inadequate. But Brett, what do we know about her? She ran for office, right?
She did. She ran for office in New Hampshire during the midterms, right before this election, and won a 10-way primary in New Hampshire. She ended up losing the general election, but I thought she was incredibly poised, handled the press very well, and did an outstanding job, especially for her first press briefing. So, and you know, Donald Trump was particularly tough on that position. There were 4 press secretaries during his first term. And so I think for her to do what she did with the campaign and now to start as the press secretary, there's an old Bible verse that says, "Let no man despise your youth." And I think we should take that as credence as well in the press.
Yeah, I thought she gave a pretty good. I don't know what you thought of it, Tom. I thought she was pretty sure-footed. The press room was packed. I don't think I've ever seen it that jam-packed with journalists, and a lot of journalists from outlets that previously might not have been allowed in or given credentials, or certainly not called on to ask questions. So I don't know what you thought of it. I thought she did a pretty good job.
I mean, you saw outlets like Breitbart, Axios, who had not ordinarily been represented in the press room, represented. And I think that's it's a signal from her and from the administration that they want to talk to the outlets who actually have the audiences. Some of the, the legacy media doesn't have the audience that some of these other outlets do. Excuse me.
This is obviously a conversation we go into with caution, because it's so hard measuring exactly how far stuff goes, isn't it, these days? But traditional journalists won't like it. I can see from their point of view the logic of widening the pool and allowing different people in, and I guess it does speak to the changing world. I'd say the other thing I was just thinking, sort of by the by, he is a news machine, Donald Trump, isn't he? I mean, I don't know how you guys keep up. I feel like every time I look at my phone, there's something else. There's like a new executive order. I mean, honestly, have you ever seen anything like it?
But this is this is a strategy, right? This is as Stephen Miller, his new deputy chief of staff, the philosophy is flood the zone, basically. So, whether it comes to press or to legislative proposals or ideas, it's sort of blitzkrieg, for want of a better word, just complete domination of the news cycle every day. And you're right, it's been bewildering at times. It's been awesome in the literal word, literal use of the word. I mean, they have the contrast with how they have got underway this time compared to his first administration, where I think, a lot of people were critical that they didn't, they weren't that well organised, and there was a lot of kind of internal churn of staff and so on. This time, it feels like they've been planning for this, that they are much more disciplined.
I think so. They've really hit the ground running. I would describe it as shock and awe, because I do think the press and even some of the public is shocked at how fast the president is moving on all of his promises, and how much he has been communicating. I mean, just think about the last week. You had the inaugural. He's held a couple of press conferences. He's gaggled on Air Force One a couple of times. He's already taken a trip. He's probably had more contact with the media in this last week than Joe Biden had in a couple of years. And so I think when you see what's happening, they're trying to suck up the energy. And so far they've been very successful. I mean, the Democrats are really on the back foot right now, are at a loss for a message, and Republicans are marching forward with Donald Trump at the helm.
There are so many things we could talk about because, as you say, he's been doing so much. But let's start with one of his biggest pledges, immigration. And it kind of very quickly played over into foreign policy, didn't it? But the crackdown on illegal migration has started. Let's just have a listen to this brief summary of some of the things we've seen this week.
President Donald Trump says he has issued his first tariff on Colombia after 2 U.S. deportation flights of undocumented migrants were not allowed to land.
We've made it clear to every country that they will be taking back our people that we're sending out, the criminals, the illegal aliens.
President Donald Trump is claiming victory after Colombia relented in a standoff over flights carrying deported migrants.
I think Greenland will be worked out with us. I think we're going to have it.
Dear President Trump, listen very carefully. Greenland has been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It's an integrated part of our country. It is not for sale. Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump, off.
Okay. It's always good to have things you have to beep out on this podcast said by politicians, but I guess he's learning to speak Donald Trump's language, isn't he? He's like, let's be blunt. So where can we begin here? Because it started with immigration, as I said, and then bled over into foreign policy, really. But let's begin. What we probably haven't seen here is what Americans are making of these first moves on immigration itself. What do you both make of that before we talk about the foreign policy implications?
Well, I mean, they definitely, I would say, have launched with great zeal this drive to deport illegal immigrants, right? I mean, we've seen that on the TV screens here. It's getting a lot of play on the main US networks. We've seen officials out sort of, literally kicking down doors and carting people away, in a blaze of publicity. Now, in terms of, the numbers, it's kind of difficult to get a handle on it. I saw one figure suggesting 3,500 so far. Another figure suggesting yesterday alone, another 1,100 had been deported. I mean, Fox News were reporting that immigrant encounters on the border, so that's any kind of interaction with illegal immigrants on the border, was down 60% to about 1,000 a day. It's difficult to sort of get any kind of true picture, but look, if perception is reality, which it largely is when it comes to politics, I don't know what you think, Brett. I mean, they are dominating the news agenda, and they are getting a lot of people on planes. Having said that, there are, according to the Pew Research Center, 11 million illegal migrants in the US. So, I mean, this is a drop in the ocean so far. But
they're off to a great start. There's a long way to go. But not only are they deporting people, they've restarted building the border wall. They've sent troops to the southern border. They're trying to reinforce the border to try to cut off those that are coming across the border. By all accounts, they're off to a very good start on immigration. The demonstration with the Colombian government, I thought, was a demonstration that peace through strength is back. I mean, that was the president exercising American power to tell the Colombian government, you will take these immigrants back into your country.
Just to jump in, so people may have missed this because it happened in a blink of an eye, but basically the Colombian president suggested he wasn't going to accept these plane loads of migrants being returned to his country. Trump threatened 50% tariffs, and then the Colombians backed down. Yeah. Essentially, that's what happened.
And everyone should remember that immigration is issue one for Donald Trump and his supporters. It was the first thing he talked about when he came down the escalator in 2016, and it is what has driven the MAGA movement for many, many, many years. So immigration is the most important issue. And by the way, amongst the general public, deporting these criminal illegal immigrants is a more popular policy than even Donald Trump is. The New York Times had a poll just a few days ago which had it over 59%. And so and had Donald Trump at 52%, which was an all-time high for his popularity amongst the general public. So it is a popular policy right now. Why? Because a lot of Americans have felt the effects of illegal immigration. They've seen it affect their personal safety through illegal drugs coming across the border. They've seen it in public safety with potential terrorists coming across the border. And they've seen it stretch their resources in their local communities and turned every town into a border town. So it's a popular policy. And so far, he's off to a good start.
I mean, there will be some, Tom, that you know, there'll be a lot of people who'd be concerned about the effects on families, right? You know, this idea of families being broken up if the parents have come here illegally, but the kids are born in America and therefore are American. You know, we can talk about that issue, birthright citizenship. But it's just my journalistic duty to point out there are plenty of people in this country who are also worried about where this is heading and the scale of it and the human impact.
I feel like in foreign policy terms, we've seen Trump's maverick style being very successful in Colombia, as Brett, you say. Colombia doesn't do what he wants. He knows Americans do want to see Colombian illegal immigrants being deported back. He gives them an ultimatum they can't deal with because their economy is so dependent on the US and they have to back down. Now, you might argue that is relatively low-hanging fruit in the sense that Colombia is just in no position to refuse, truthfully. So you might mark that down as a big success to Trump's particular type of negotiating style. I feel like Greenland probably isn't. He's embarking on something. You know, Denmark's a country in NATO. I don't really know what he's trying to achieve. He seems to be riling people up. I'm not sure that's really going anywhere. Would you agree that that's fair, or do you think he's got some master plan for Greenland and Denmark and NATO and the EU that is not apparent to us over here?
We were talking about this just a minute ago, whether it's a sort of shot across the bows to the likes of Russia, you know, sort of saying... So it's that classic Trump negotiating style where he goes to 10 so that he can come back and settle at 5. And I wonder, Brett, if this is part of that. He's got no intention of annexing Greenland, but he wants to tell Russia this is in our sphere of influence.
Well, I certainly don't think he'll send in the troops to take Greenland, but I certainly think he's interested in making sure that the Danes know that Greenland is something that is valuable from a national security standpoint to the United States. And he wants to make sure that they are on our side in giving us what we need to ensure the national security of the United States, whether it's selling Greenland to us or making sure we have the right military bases there in Greenland or the access to the intelligence. So I certainly think that he is playing another strength move, and we'll see what happens. And it's certainly a message to the Russians that we intend to protect the east coast of the United States.
He had just to jump in there on this for a second, we're told he had a very, bloody phone call with the PM of Denmark. Denmark's a member of NATO. Why wouldn't the Danes give the Americans everything they wanted in terms of bases? We're entirely reliant in terms of European security on the US. why would we say no? Why does he have to go to all this business about he's going to annex it or he's going to send in the troops? I mean, that just gets everyone's backs up, and it's hard to see what it actually achieves, isn't it?
Well, I think it's part of a larger strategy to move NATO to actually doing more for their own defenses. And, right now, I think the president feels like NATO, and rightly so in some cases, doesn't spend what it should on its own defense. And so I'm not sure that just because they're a member of NATO, they'll go along with us is an argument that he buys. I think that he thinks he's got to use strength to jolt the alliance and to make sure that they're doing what they should to defend themselves rather than always counting on the United States to have their back.
Okay, let's move on to January the 6th, and I just want you to have a watch or take a listen to this.
This is what freedom looks like. This is what we fight for. This is what we stood at the Capitol for. We are back, the Patriots. We don't have to crawl in the back corners of Facebook and Instagram being censored. We've got X, we've got Trump, we've got Musk, we've got the Dream Team. We're back. Freedom!
Now, I'm not sure even many of Donald Trump's, you guys will correct me, but I get the impression that even a lot of Donald Trump's supporters did not expect him to let out every single member, every single person who was imprisoned for January the 6th offences, including those who were beating police officers with baseball bats. Please explain to me how that's a good idea for many Trump supporters.
Well, first of all, even the vice president said just a few days before that he didn't think those who had attacked police officers should be pardoned. But remember, this is a promise that Donald Trump made on the campaign trail, and it was baked into why people voted for Donald Trump. They decided that they were fine with that because they still supported him. They wanted him to go get the economy, get immigration under control. And I think that if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, look at what Joe Biden did on his just last few days, his last day in office. Pardoned his son when he said he wouldn't, pardoned his family, pardoned members of the January 6th committee. I think those pardons were much more egregious than what Donald Trump did.
I mean, Lindsey Graham, the South Carolina senator, has voiced concern, hasn't he? He said, I don't like this. He feels this, letting people out who, for example, had tasered a police officer, and the police officer had a heart attack. It just sends a terrible signal. It's a terrible look.
Sure, but it's also a terrible look for the president to preemptively pardon members of his family, members of the January 6th committee, and to pardon Hunter Biden for anything he has done and will do until the day he dies. And I think that the preemptive pardon creates a bigger problem than some of these other pardons, for sure.
The thing about that, though, is Hunter Biden, yeah, sure, I don't think even Democrats like that. I've heard a lot of Democrats voicing their opposition to it, saying they're very uncomfortable about it. I think the preemptive pardons are really something entirely different. So maybe let's not get into that because it all depends on how vengeful you think Donald Trump is going to be. But it's just, I suppose the thing that just strikes a lot of people over here is that, we often think of the Republicans as the kind of law and order party. And so it's very hard to see how you've got your heads around the idea that you're pardoning people who beat police officers, in some cases with baseball bats. Like, how has the party of law and order made its peace with that? That doesn't make sense to a lot of people in Britain.
Yeah, and I completely understand that, but you do have to compare these two, and here's the reason why. Donald Trump talked about doing this on the campaign trail. 77 million Americans voted for Donald Trump. They said they were fine with him doing that. While Joe Biden said he would not do preemptive pardons and he wouldn't pardon his son, he lied about that. So I do think that there is a comparison to be made between the two. I may not agree with all of the pardons themselves, but they were baked in to the campaign and to the democracy, right? People voted for Donald Trump knowing that he was possibly going to pardon every one of the January 6ers.
I do sometimes wonder, in a sort of counterfactual way, what if Joe Biden had pardoned the January the 6th prisoners? I mean, would that have been a way of, even though he probably vehemently, disagreed with what they did, obviously, but a way of trying to draw a line under this chapter, a dark chapter, I think you'd agree, in American history, and saying we need to focus on the future and we need to move on from this?
I don't think he ever would have considered it. And I do think that a lot of folks saw the January 6ers representative of the way the Department of Justice had been weaponized against conservatives particularly. And so I feel like they saw that action as something that was fighting back against the weaponization of the justice system, not just as pardons for people who protested on January 6th.
I think even for a lot of Donald Trump supporters, the whole lost election thing has been troubling. He didn't lose the election. There weren't any credible allegations of fraud. The whole thing has wasted a lot of energy, and it seems, I think, kind of odd now, given that he won the last election incredibly convincingly in a lot of ways. And, here he is in the White House, all powerful. His approval ratings are incredibly high. It just feels an ever odder thing. Do we think it's done? It's finished. We're not going to have to talk about it anymore. It's a closed chapter. Or is he going to keep going on about it? Is he going to keep going back to it? What do you both reckon?
I personally think reputationally he can't now say that he lost the election in 2020, right? I mean, that would be reputationally so damaging for him. So he's sort of painted himself into a bit of a corner. Do you think in his heart of hearts he honestly thinks he lost? Or he won, rather?
No, I think Donald Trump believes he won the 2020 election, and he will go to his grave believing that. But for that being said,
what, Brett?
I've
never been any. It's ludicrous, right?
Well, regardless of what we talk about factually, he believes that he won the 2020 election. He believes there were problems in Pennsylvania and Georgia and other places around the country where that caused him to lose. But I do think this. I think the quick pardon of the January 6ers, and I think the way that the administration has moved on substantive issues, says that he's willing to put this in the past, not dwell on it, and move forward for the good of the country. And that's what he's been doing. I mean, I think if you look at the first week, he hasn't done anything on election integrity per se. He's focused on substance, whether it's immigration, energy, reckless spending in Washington. I think he's focused on moving forward on substantive issues.
Okay, last question I want to just ask you both. We've had a big week for both AI and kind of cryptocurrency. I don't necessarily want to connect the two. It's got very little coverage over in the UK. The fact that Donald Trump, shortly before he entered the White House, launched a meme coin, which appears to have made him an enormous sum of money. I mean, many billions potentially. And I just find that so completely intriguing, mostly because it's something that a lot of people just don't understand, but also because it's such a kind of fascinating. Some people say it's an incredibly corrupt thing to do. It's certainly an unusual thing to do. Melania's also launched a meme coin. That may have made her a lot of money. I mean, what do you... It feels like, you're going back 100, 150 years to a totally different era of US capitalism. What do you both think of that? And we should probably also talk about the kind of huge hit that traditional companies who are into AI have taken this week as well. It's been a big market, a big week for those things that lots of people don't understand as well as they should, including probably me.
I'll try and very briefly, for the 99% of viewers who may not understand what meme coins are, just try and explain it. So there are cryptocurrencies, things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, which you can argue about whether they have any value, but they are long established and transparently traded. There's a transparent ledger, so you can see who buys what and gives it to whom. Then there's a whole raft of other cryptocurrencies, which are basically sort of jokes and which have been called meme coins. They've been called much ruder things as well. And I think this Trump coin and the Melania coin fall under the kind of meme coins that are effectively, as I say, they're kind of, it's almost more fool the person that buys them, right? I mean,
Sure.
Part of me thinks if people lost a bunch of money on it, well, what did they expect?
Sure. P.T. Barnum, there's a sucker born every minute. And so, these are things that I don't pretend to understand, but Donald Trump is an amazing businessman, obviously, first. If you look
is
at
it a conflict
career,
of interest, though? I mean, he is the president. Should this be allowed?
I think as long as he doesn't use his office against ethics rules, I think he's perfectly within his boundaries. I mean, I think the thing that we should be paying much more attention to is the AI front and what happened this week with DeepSeek. We want to make sure that the United States is the world's leader in AI technology. And so I would hope that what happened this week will be kind of a Sputnik moment to jar us and to the president has assembled a team on this. He's trying to increase investment in AI here in America. I hope that we would use this moment to make sure that we are competing with and beating anyone, including the Chinese, in the AI market, because it's so incredibly important to the future, not only of America, but the future of the world.
Okay, just a couple of things. Do you think Donald Trump understands the crypto coin that's got his name on it?
I do not know the answer to that,
Does anyone?
But I don't understand it, and so yeah.
Right, and on AI, I mean, he said this is a wake-up call to American AI developers because, just to recap, this Chinese company has come out with a very good version of ChatGPT that's almost as good, developed for a fraction of the cost. Does this mean that Trump and America loses their competitive advantage on AI?
No, I think it's the wake-up call. We just like in the space race, Sputnik wasn't a symbol that we had lost our competitive edge. It was a wake-up call that we needed to move faster with more efficiency, and I think the same thing is happening here. So I hope that's what will happen in the AI market.
Well, we should probably wind it up there. I mean, there's probably about 10 news stories that have broken while we've been recording this, but we'll have to deal with this next time. It's great to see you both and chat to you, sir. Thanks for your time. And to all of you,
take care
very much.
Thank you.
Listening or watching. Goodbye.